Hello, friends, comrades, and interested others. As I've said in previous videos, there are many aspects of our lives that dominant ideologies such as capitalism, colonialism, and whiteness requires us to alienate ourselves from. And in order for us to combat colonialism, both spiritually and collectively, we need to address these areas of alienation and atrophy in our lives and kind of reestablish the connective tissues that have been impacted by that. And so I've made previous videos talking about alienation from death and alienation from ancestry. And in this video, I want to talk about alienation from the personal physical body. So there are ideas that permeate Western culture through popular media and science that our brain is our primary, if not sole, center of information processing. The brain is essentially where our self lives and maybe even where our soul lives, and the rest of our body is basically a very complicated meat sack. Science and psychiatry have been slowly moving away from this idea and towards an idea of the embodied self, but this has been the dominant kind of thought pattern about the self for a very long time. There are ideas expressed through popular media that we could essentially preserve ourselves by preserving our physical heads or even just our brains, or that we could preserve our consciousness by uploading the contents of our physical brains to a computer. Western philosophers have even tried to identify which specific part of our brain holds our soul. These ideas reflect a pattern of alienation under capitalism that basically enforces that we should disconnect our sense of self from the world around us, from the land, from community, from other beings, so that our self is only housed in our personal body. And then even farther from that, that our self is not even in our personal body, that our self is in our brain, and then our self isn't even in our brain, it's in like a tiny part of our brain. And so the concept of the self is shrinked smaller and smaller into these like smaller and smaller kind of like cages or categories. And it's important to understand that like the concept of self is a cultural concept. It's not a universal or ubiquitous concept. And many different places and peoples and times in the world, the concept of the self has been very different, and people have even had concepts of self that extend far beyond their physical body. So this concept of knowledge as being primarily or purely intellectual really serves to invalidate experiential knowledge and emotional and relational knowledge. There is this line in the song Norse Truth by Against Me, and the first time I heard it, it really stuck with me. And that's just because I can intellectualize it doesn't mean I feel it in my chest. Just because I can taste it doesn't mean I sink my teeth into it. And ironically, as soon as I heard that, I was like, I know what you mean. Like, I feel it in my chest what you're saying about not feeling it in your chest. And I think that anybody who has had an experience of heart knowledge or embodied knowledge or experiential knowledge, which we all have, you understand the difference between when you know something in your mind, or you think about something, or you think you know something, and when you actually know it in your body, in your heart, in your gut. And I think that the best example of this that most people can kind of understand is the experience of parenthood. Like, there's a lot of people, or pretty much every parent I've ever spoken to about this has said, like, it's a completely different experience when you meet your baby for the first time. And so, you can intellectually prepare yourself and read all the books and, think about what you're going to name your kid and all these things. But the moment you like see that child and hold that child, there's a level of knowledge of them and of your relationship that gets triggered in your body that you never could have reached that point on a purely intellectual level. Humans are incredibly social creatures, and emotional knowledge is core to the human experience. And emotional knowledge is housed primarily in the body. One can experience harm that is non-physical in nature, purely emotional or psychological abuse, and have that knowledge and trauma reside in the body. For example, I believe I was told by my doctor actually that like 90 to 95% of everyone who is diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress has chronic pain. And I have complex post-traumatic stress and chronic pain. So emotional experiences cause physical pain in people's bodies. And so that's just one, and anybody who has experienced trauma probably understands how that works, how that results in fatigue and lowered immune system and other physical impacts. Our entire body is a mind. It's not just our brain that's a mind. Our entire body is a mind. And each part of our body serves different purposes in terms of information processing and knowledge storing and perception. Our gut is our instinctual center, and our gut often contains knowledge and processes information that pertains to our survival. You get this idea of the gut instinct, and it's like, without having a thought about it, without having run through the rationalization of collecting information and processing and storytelling, your gut tells you when something is dangerous. And part of what happens with that is that you gather micro information, and that is not being processed in your brain. Like, that is being processed through the mind gut highway. And then your gut is the thing that tells you, this is a dangerous situation. I don't know why. It doesn't matter why, but I know it's a dangerous situation, or I know that this is making me feel danger. Obviously, our gut reactions are not always valid, because those things can also be informed by social conditioning to make us feel afraid of things that are not actually dangerous. But that process is not a mental process. It's an embodied process. Our gut is also one of our primary emotional centers that processes stress and anxiety and fear and contentment and joy and many other emotions. And so much about our emotional health depends on and is related to the health of our gut system. Our heart then is the seat of our relational knowledge. So it holds knowledge that is relevant to our relationships with other people and other beings, and it processes feelings such as love, empathy, camaraderie, and shame. Oftentimes we feel it in our hearts first when we have a moment of genuine connection or resonance with another person or being. So our brains then are the center of our intellectual knowledge, and they hold knowledge that involves narrative and meaning. Our brains process many emotions as well, and most emotions live in more than one place in our bodies. It's important to remember, though, that the process of creating meaning and narrative attached to events involves collecting information from the senses, from the emotions, and from knowledge that is stored in other parts of our bodies. Our brains are incredibly powerful and incredibly important, but like any other part of our body, they cannot function on their own. We are fundamentally embodied beings, and our bodies dictate so much about how we perceive and interact with the world and our internal experiences. For example, people with Black bodies experience unique racialized struggles and experiences when moving through the world, and that informs their identities and their internal experiences and many other aspects of their lives. People with disabled bodies have their experiences and subjectivities shaped by how their bodies interact with an inaccessible world and how they are perceived by others. As a person with a relatively petite, white, optically able-bodied body, aspects of my personality and my development, ways that I show up in social space, experiences that I've had are definitely shaped by my body and how my body is perceived and politically positioned. Our minds cannot be held as separate things from the bodies through which our personalities are forming. So a lot of the time when I talk about things like this that are related to, the personal body, personal health and well-being, personal development, I feel like people might respond by thinking that talking about that is individualistic, or that, we need to focus on the movement over our individual selves. But I think that if we are to think of ourselves collectively and to act collectively, we do need to take personal care of ourselves. A cell in a body cannot function if it isn't nourished and kept warm and communicating with other cells and maintaining its cellular boundary to protect itself from harm. So given that we're working towards trying to create a healthy collective body, we also need to be working on creating healthy personal bodies at the same time and as part of the same process. Because and I do understand, and I do want to emphasize that our health is limited by the health of the collective body. I would never encourage somebody to take on an individualistic mindset of like, I'm gonna opt out of society and just like fast and do juice cleanses and do yoga every day and just focus on being personally as healthy as I can and kind of like screw everyone else. Like, we can only be as healthy as our communities are. Like, we can only be as healthy as the land is. So I'm not talking about prioritizing yourself over that. And I'm not talking about necessarily even pursuing that as a separate process. But I'm saying that personal health needs to be viewed as a priority within the process of working towards collective health. If we are trying to resist capitalist alienation, the first step in that process is to resist the alienation that we've experienced from our own physical bodies, moving back into occupying our whole physical selves. And I want to talk about how to do that. I want to talk about, some methods and tools and activities that you can do to help you move from up here to the rest of you. So one thing for my fellow anxiety people is that when you're having an anxiety spiral or you're otherwise stuck in your head for some reason, either you're doom scrolling or you had a negative interaction with someone and you're just like playing it through, like grinding the wheels up here, often the contents of your head kind of become your whole world, and then the rest of your body is being neglected. And so something that I've started doing is that I will place my hand on my chest or place my hand on my gut, and I'll remind myself that I don't live in my head. I live in my whole body. I live in my heart and my gut as well. And I try to move the center of my consciousness from being in my brain to being in my gut, and just kind of like move it down my body with my hand. And that is surprisingly grounding and very calming, and kind of helps me situate myself in the physical world again. Another important and fun thing to do is to dance. And you don't have to be good, and you don't have to look cute, and you don't have to think that your movements look good to other people. There is some major colonial bullshit that has gone into the cultural suppression of dance and the instillment of shame in our body movements, and so we have to, shake that off. And so try dancing even if you're just alone in your room, and don't worry about looking cute, don't worry about how your body movements would be perceived by others. Just start by moving in ways that feel physically good to you. A workshop that I found incredibly liberating was I took a workshop at a retreat, I think a year or two ago, probably 2 years ago now, that was on ecstatic movement. And so if you can find something on ecstatic movement, that is a very, very liberating thing to do. And it's basically just about, removing that shame and self-consciousness and being able to move your body in ways that feel good. If you're too embarrassed or too, in it to start with your entire physical body, a suggestion that I would say is to start with your hand. Like, put on some music and just move your hand to the music and do what feels good. Explore the movements that your hand can make, because your hand is an incredible thing. I mean, you take two hands, they can speak whole languages, right? With ASL and other versions of sign language, your hands have a huge range of motion and creativity in them. And so try playing with just your hands first, and that can help you have an entry point to moving your body in ways that are creative and self-expressive and fulfilling. Honor and celebrate your body. Say a list of gratitudes for all that your body does for you. No matter what your body looks like or the specific things that it does or doesn't do, your body is amazing and does so much to take care of you, and your body is you. Another really important thing to do is to go outside and, if you can, walk with your bare feet on the ground. Something that I've been doing this winter is several times a week I'll actually go for a walk, usually into the woods or by a lake or river somewhere, and I will take off my shoes and socks and I will walk barefoot in the snow for a short period, for however long I feel comfortable doing it. It's not dangerous to do that for short periods of time, and I feel like I am connecting with the world around me and connecting with the land and experiencing winter in a unique way, when I can let my body experience it. And so that is a suggestion that I have for an activity to try. And while you're doing these things, an important thing to remember is to try to resist embarrassment. I know it's hard. I know that we've all got anxiety, but there is some real colonial bullshit informing the anxiety that tells us that something that is healthy and pleasurable is uncool. Roll down a hill, stick your feet in some mud, take opportunities to do things that are fun and pleasurable and affirming of your body. And the last thing that I'm going to suggest is check in with where your emotions live in your body. I've included in the description a handout that you can print out or color in on your computer, and you can fill in these blank bodies with different colors reflecting where you feel it in your body when you experience different emotions. So those are just a few suggestions of things that you can do to help you begin to combat that alienation and move into and connect to your physical body. And I hope that this was helpful to you. I'm like trying to do more body movements as I'm like feeling more aware of that as I'm talking about it. My body's just like, hell yeah, move me. And so anyway, I hope that this video was helpful and informative, and if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, the comment section is open. I'm going to be making another video soon talking about the collective body and moving away from alienation in the collective body. That's all for today, and I will see you next time. Peace out.